Hello, I hope you all are doing well. This is lesson 3, using objects. In this lesson, we will cover classes, objects, instances of classes, methods, initializing objects, parameters, overloading, no argument constructors, PIVs, formal parameters versus actual parameters, void methods, return value methods, string concatenation, the string class in general, including its methods, wrapper classes, and last but not least, the math class. So, in this lesson, we will first talk about classes and objects. So, in Java, there are many times when you will use other classes which have methods that will be beneficial to you, so you don't have to go through and write all of the code for methods that already exist out there in the world. So the way how we use those classes is through objects. And essentially what objects are instances of the class so that you can access all of the variables and methods of the class, so you don't have to do all the complicated stuff that some classes may do. This is exists wherever you may need to use complicated code, but can do it in an easier way when the developers have already done all the code for you. So before we get into classes, I want to talk about this, the date class. So this is an oversimplified class, not as complex as the ones you're going to download from the real world. And the way how you would download other classes in the real world is through the import statements like I had shown you earlier. You can go up here and do import java.util.scanner. And the scanner class essentially was created by a separate programmer to get input from the user. But we don't have to write all of that code. We're essentially just using the methods from the scanner class, and that was also through using objects. Now we will go more specifically into how that worked, and I can go over the scanner class again as well. So again, back to the date class. Again, it's an oversimplified version of a class, and essentially what this class does is stores the date for you. So let's just say, oh, today is Monday, June 8th, 2020. So it's going to store the date as June 8th, 2020. So, and then it also has methods in which we can receive the date, and also methods in which we can change the date if we need to. But to use this class, we're going to have to create an instance of the date class, and the way how we do that is through objects. So you may remember from the scanner class, we did something like this: scan equals new scanner system.in. And just to not cause any errors, I'll just import it. Scanner. All right. So, oops, I forgot to put my period in Java. It's a semicolon. And so scanner. So scanner is the name of the class. Scan is the name that we have given to the object. New just stands for we're creating a new instance of the class, and back to the class because we're creating a new scanner object. And then this is the parameter. This is just a parameter we have to put in. So now let's talk about the date class and how it applies here, and I'll go and explain the parameters if you didn't quite understand them. So we have date, and let's just name it. We can also name this time, okay, equals new date. Remember, this equals is an assignment operator, not like this equals this, but. And then our parameters, we're just going to do it without any parameters for now. And what you call when creating an object without any parameters, that's called the no argument constructor. In other words, it's also the default constructor because you haven't set any of the values. The class does everything for you. You don't have to pass anything into the class. So I'd like to just show you what's inside the date class. So when you're accessing other people's classes, you're essentially going to be given some documentation. And all you're going to see in the documentation is just this. you're just going to see this, and then there's going to be a little comment description above it as to what it does. So maybe the comment for this is constructor for the date class with parameters. So essentially what these things are called are constructors, but we'll get that later into the class when we get into the class lesson. But what we had created an object was the one of the default constructor, because look, there are no parameters present when we're creating the object. And if we go back over here, there is no parameters being passed. So when we create a new object, this constructor is called, and it essentially just sets the year to a value of 1, the month to a value of 1, and the day to a value of 1. It's just default. Like I said, that's why we sometimes call it the default constructor, or constructor without any parameters. So now that we have created an instance of the date class, we can start to utilize the methods that it has. And let's just compile it. And this is what I was mentioning. This is what I like about BlueJ. It shows you which classes are connected in the different hierarchy between the classes. So because lesson 3, this is the class where I've created our main method and all, this is creating an instance of the date class. So that's why we have this arrow, so that we can be organized. So now that we've created a new object, let's start to use some of the methods in the date class. Again, you'll have access to the documentation, but you won't see any of the stuff that happens within the methods. You'll just see the method signature. That's what we call this. So let's just say, oh, I actually want to set the year to something else. Maybe I want to set the year to, let's say 2020. So I'm going to call time, and then we're going to call the dot. Dot is what we use to call a method from this object. So whenever you use a dot, you have to be certain that whatever is to the left of the dot is always an object, and whatever to the right is either a method or a variable that you're calling. Don't just throw out the dot out there. That's a common mistake that many programmers make when they're first starting out. They start just throwing out the dot when it is really not necessary, does not accomplish the task. So again, when you use a dot, you want to be certain that you have an object on the left side and a method you're referencing on the right side. So again, we wanted to call the set year method, and let's just set the year to 2020. And we see over here, it takes an integer parameter. So we have to throw in an integer. 2020 is an integer. So this should work. Now, that is what are called void methods. They don't actually return anything. They are just accomplishing a function. I will get into return values a little later, but for now, we just have this. So so why don't you guys just take a little time, analyze this, and see what you think. All right. So now that the year has been set to 2020, we may want to just see, oh, how do we see if the year has actually been changed to 2020, just testing. Well, we can go back into our documentation and we see, oh, there's a print method. So we can just call that. It should print out all the variables that we have. So let's just call time.print. And there will be a description above. I don't have any descriptions above, but I'll just add one right now. So prints out the variable values for every variable in this class. And I'm like, oh, that would be a wonderful way to see what each of the variable values are. So we're going to want to compile. And we're going to go over here and we're going to call our main method. Let's see. Oh, great. The year has been successfully changed to 2020. And the month is still at 1, day is still at 1, as what was specified in the default constructor. All right, let's just try out something else. Say we want to make this 2019. We'll just call it. And oh, the year has been now changed to 2019. So essentially what void methods do is all they do is perform a function. We aren't really getting any value back. So now that you've understood that, we're going to talk about the other constructor. So now that we had seen, so this was a method that didn't have any parameters. This was a method that did have one parameter. Constructors can also have parameters as well. So date, time, let's just say 2 equals new date. All right, what are the parameters? We go back to our documentation and we see, oh, so we need an integer, and an integer. One integer for the year, for the month, and for the day. Again, all of this doesn't matter. That just we just care about this and the method signature. That's all we care about. So let's see. We're going to need 3 parameters. So the first it said was year, month, and day. So let's just say, all right, we'll set the year to 2018. Month, I want to say it's like February, so we're going to put 2. And the day, let's just say the 14th. Call that. And the way how we can differentiate between these two objects is by the variable name. Whenever we call time, we're referencing to this instance of the class. But whenever we have time2, we'll be referencing this instance of the class. And you can have as many instances of the classes as you need. There's no limit. Like I can go and create another one. Date time3 equals new date. You can go on and on. It's as many as you need. That's the wonderful thing about creating instances of classes. But I don't need this. We'll only create as many as we need. Otherwise, it ends up overloading the computer and it ends up taking more memory space, which essentially will slow down the computer. Let's just clear out the terminal so that we have a clean slate. And let's just say, okay, time2.print just to see if everything is working properly. And we don't need any of this. You guys understood how that worked. And if you didn't, you can always rewind and go back to it. But we'll compile and void the method. So let's see if everything ended up correctly. So we set the year at 2018. We have the year at 2018. Month is at 2. Day is at 14. All right, everything worked out perfectly. And say, all right, maybe I wanted to just set, we'll set something else. So I'm feeling pretty comfortable with the year, but I want to change the month to March. So again, we go over to our documentation. We have a method. Oh, we have a method called setMonth that will change the value of month to whatever the user passes. Oh, that seems like something we'd want to use. So again, these comments would be there in the documentation. I just haven't added them because I just created this class. But we'll get into that class lesson later. So set month, and we'll just say 3, right? Because we wanted to set it to March. So compile it. We'll call the main method, and look at here, change the month. So now that you essentially understand what void methods do, again, all they do is perform a function. They don't return any value. Now we're going to start getting into return methods. So we saw over here these return to void, and now let's go over to methods that actually return a value. So this method returns an integer value. This one returns an integer value as well. This one returns an integer value as well. So what this method is going to do is return the value of year back to the user. And when it says value of year, I'm referencing to the year variable up here. So that's what all of these methods do. So get month, that's going to return the value of month, and day. This one's going to return the value of day. So we see all right, we want to this return the value of year back to the user. So let's just say we're going to call our system.out.println, if you remember that from the previous lesson. And let's just say, all right, I want to see what the value was time. So we have our object, and we're going to want to click get year, which will return an integer. So this will return an integer. So if you remember, everything in the default constructor was set to 1. And the way how we know that we're calling this instance of the class is because of this variable name. And we see get year. All right, so this should return the value of the year, and then our print method will print out whatever was returned. So let's see what was returned back to the user. 1. Oh, that worked out perfectly, because in this one, the value of year was set to 1. Now let's see something that's right in front of you. So I have the value of year set at 2018. Time 2, because that's the name of this instance of the class or object, and we'll hit get year again. So let's see. Ooh, looky here, it printed out 2018. So that's what return methods do. They just take the value and return a specific value. The void methods, they just performed a function. They didn't necessarily return a value back to the user. They just did something. But the return value statements returned an actual value back to the user. So now that you understand how void and return methods work, we're going to talk about some vocabulary. And that is very important in Java as well, understanding what vocabulary to use. So again, you can see that we have 2 constructors for this class. All right, so when we are using 2 constructors with the same exact name, so we have same exact name over here, same exact name over here, but they have different parameters, this is called overloading. Again, it's called overloading, and that is when you have the same name but different parameters. And the same thing can exist with methods. Say we had a method called print, and then there was another method named print, but it actually had a parameter. That would be called overloading. These things, as I have mentioned before, are called parameters, what are passed by the user into the method. And you can see that over here when we're passing values, we're passing them to the parameters. Now, there are 2 types of parameters, formal parameters and actual parameters. Formal parameters are the parameters that are found on the actual method signature of the class that you are using. So we're using the date class, and this, as I had mentioned before, is the method signature of the class. So these parameters are the formal parameters because they exist on the method signature of the class that we're using. When we are passing parameters within the client code, the main method refers to the client code because we are using stuff from the date class. So these are the parameters that we pass over here. These are called actual parameters because these are not found on the method signature. These are rather the values that are passed by us as the programmer. So, and then whenever we're creating objects, so let me just get rid of this for a second. Time 2. You can do this. This is declaring an object, all right? But time 2 has not been initialized because we haven't set it to an actual thing. We just have reserved a space for it, but we have not put anything inside of that variable. It's the same thing as saying int year, but you have not set it to any value. You can declare it, but then you're going to have to later set it to a value, and then it works. Same thing happens with objects. You can do this, but then we're going to have to call date, and we're actually going to have to instantiate it. For objects, it's called instantiating. For primitive variables, it's called initializing, because we're not creating a new object, we are just initializing it to a value. Whenever we create a new object, it's called instantiating. Again, for primitives, it's called initializing. For objects, it's called instantiating. So now that you understand how that, and then this again is just declaring what we have, up here. That's just called declaring. So now that we got a couple of vocabulary words in here, let's go over here and talk about string concatenation. Again, if you have any questions about how objects work, then you can go scroll down to the bottom of this page and you should see an option to set up a tutoring time. But essentially all you need to know in this lesson is you have an object, you need to have an object on the left side. Use the dot, and an object always needs to be on the left side of the dot, and a method always needs to be on the right. And there are two types of methods. There are the void methods, which perform a function, and that was seen with our set. We just set the year to a specific value. And then there are return value methods, which actually return a value back to the user, as what was seen over here. And we don't necessarily have to print out the return values. We can also just say, all right, int year equals that. And the variable just gets saved in the year, whatever value is returned. So now that you guys understand everything about how objects work, again, you don't have to worry about classes. We will go over that in the next lesson, in the class lesson. But I will show you an example of what documentation looks like, because that wasn't the best example of what documentation looks like. So, documentation math class. So, here we go. This is what documentation looks like. So say we have the math class, all right? That's a separate class created by a Java developer. So let's see. So these are the methods. So as we can see over here, this returns a double value, and this is the parameter, this is the name of the method, and the purpose of this method is to return the absolute value of whatever is passed into this parameter. Again, you can see that for normal multiple things. And whenever it's a void method, it'll usually say void over here, but I don't seem to see any of those over here. And let's see. So this isn't the best example of anything. So let me see if I can find a better example. And essentially for constructor, you will be able to see constructor also. It doesn't have the constructor setting here for some reason, but it'll be the same exact thing. It'll give you the name of the constructor, the parameters that need to be passed within, and a little description of what the constructor accomplishes. And essentially all constructors do the same thing, is instantiate a new object for you. But now you guys understand about that, how that works. So now the next part of our lesson is talking about string concatenation. And in other words, that's just adding strings together. So in the previous lesson, we had talked about how to declare and initialize strings, but we hadn't necessarily talked about how to put them together. So that's what we're going to be talking about. So say we have one thing called string str. Again, we can name it whatever we want. Equals, and we need to have our string in quotations. Let's just name this hello. All right, and let's say we have another string. And let's say we just want to say this world. So now how do we put these two strings together? So string, I'm just going to name this final string. Again, I'm just using camel casing. Remember, I have two words, final and string. We're not allowed to use spaces in Java because Java would recognize those things as two separate things. So we just capitalize the second letter of the in the second word, the first letter. So let's just say string final string. All right, str plus str2. So what's that going to do is take hello. Oh, sorry, I forgot to add the semicolon. It'll take hello. It'll add world to it. So let me just show you what it looks like. So again, I'm just going to print out the value within that variable. final string. And I may have misspelled it. Yep, I misspelled it up here. All right, here we go. So there you go. Oh wait, but I wanted a space in between the two words. So when we actually want a space between two strings, we're going to have to physically go in and add that space. So just add a space there. So that's it. So we have str, then it's going to put a space, and then it's going to put str2. So let's try it again. There you go. Now that you see a space is present over there. So now that you understand how to put two strings together, we can also talk about, you can add integers in there as well. So let's say I wanted to add the number 1 after this. So we can also add the value 1. That should also work. And again, this doesn't need to be in quotations because this is an integer value. It's essentially the same thing as doing int integer equals 1. And we can just put integer. It's just the same thing. So let's see what that does. Yep, just put 1 over there because we're just adding an integer to it. Essentially, you can do that. And there is a difference when adding integers. Say when we are in strings, we have 3 plus 4 plus, let's just say, str. All right, what do you think this will print out? What you guys may be thinking is it's going to print out first the character 3, then the character 4, and then it's going to print out hello. So we'd essentially just see 3, 4, hello. Let's check it out. That is in fact not what you see. The reason for that is when you are putting two integers together before a string has been presented, Java is going to want to add these two integer values together first and then put the string because it doesn't recognize yet that this is a string. We've just declared this as a string, but when we're initializing the value of the string, Java doesn't know that we have initialized it to a string yet until it sees an actual string present. So when we initialize it, Java doesn't know this is a string. We see integer, okay, it's an integer. 4, that's also an integer, so it should print out, so it should be 7. And then we see, oh, now it's a string, so we can put some and the string. Now, what if we do it the other way? It's 3 plus 4. What do you think that will print out? str7. That's what you would assume. But it will actually print out hello 3, 4. The reason for that is because Java has already recognized that this is a string, all right? Now, since Java has first recognized that it's a string, then it goes like, all right, I need to add this to my string, and then I'm going to add this to my string. It doesn't add the integer values together because this is not recognized as an integer because we already passed a string into it. So, and again, I will talk about this again. I think I talked about it in the previous lesson, but you can do this. So str plus, and I want to put world on a new line. So we have \n, that'll put it on a new line, and we have that in our quotations, and str2. So let's take a look. There you go. It printed hello, and then on another line, it printed world. Same thing happens with \t. It's just going to put a tab in between them. So this is all just review from the previous lesson. There we go. It put a tab over there. And remember, backslash, that will just put one backslash. Hello, \world. So now that you've understood those things, we can talk about some methods within the string class. So let's just see. Okay, we don't have anything there right now. So I wanted to get the amount of characters that are present within the string2 variable. So let's count it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. So if you don't want to end up actually counting all of those out, we can do str, sorry, I'll just put it in int str dot length. And it is a no parameter method. Again, str is an object. These primitives are also objects because this is a variable of the string class. So this is also an object. So let's see. And oops, I forgot to put an actual variable name. Let's just name this string length because we want to have meaningful variable names. So we have int string length is str.length. So that should print out 5, what we had said earlier. Oops, I forgot to print it out. String length, because that's the variable over here. And this method returns a integer value. Essentially, you want to memorize these things because these are some of the most common methods. So that will just print out the amount of characters. So let's just get a clean slate over here first so that it's all clear for you guys. And 5. It did it properly. So the method, so the length method is pretty self-explanatory and pretty easy to understand. Now let's talk about the substring method. So, okay, I have a string over here, but I only want to capture, let's say, H and E. So before we talk about that, let's go over here and just we're gonna set up some comments over here so that it doesn't throw any errors for us. Oops. Okay, so we have the string. So so let's say we have hello, right? HELLO. Okay, it's pretty easy to understand. So for identifying a character in the string, you would identify the first one as index 0. Next index is going to be at index 1. Next index 2, index 3, index 4. So if we say, all right, where is the character E in the string str? Well, H is at index 0, E is at index 1. Just how the same as the character O in the str O is at index 4. So I'll just leave this down here for reference. But essentially, when we do substring, say I only want to get these 2 characters out of the string. So we're going to call the substring method. So str.substring, again, we have our object over here and the method over here. And we want to make this a string because this method is going to return a string. So we want to get this and this. So we're going to want to do 0. And how the substring method works is you would essentially think, all right, we're going to put 1 over here because from 0 to 1. That's not actually how strings work. In Java, it will go here, all right, we've done 0, we've done 1, but we're actually going to have to put 2 over here. That's something weird about Java. So when we have 0 to 2, we're only going to get this and this. The cursor essentially just cut us off over here. So the cursor keeps going here. Once we get a 2, it stops here but doesn't actually go on and get the value of whatever is at index 2. So because it's like that, if you want to get the entire string, which I kind of find pointless, but say you want to go past O, you can put 5, and that will not cause an error. Because it's going to index 5, but it just sees, okay, there's nothing there, but it just stops the cursor over there at index 5, even though there's nothing there. So let's just say we wanted to get H and E. We're going to compile that, clear it out, run the method, and we just get H and E. Same thing. We'll try it again. So let's say if we just want to get, sorry, wrong place, here. All right, let's do the counting. We want to get this specific string, ELL. So we'll start off at index 1, all right? We're going to put 1 as our starting index. And these are parameters, okay? And let's see, all right, we want to go up to here, but we remember that we have to go on to the next index in order to get this one. So we're going to have to put in 4 as the second parameter to get ELL. We will have to put 4 over there, and then we're going to go over here and compile it. And let's take a look. So we're going to run the main method, and we say ELL. It worked out successfully. So again, you can rewind in the video and see how I got this. And you can go back and see how the length method worked as well as the substring. Now we're going to talk about another method, index of. So, before we get into that, I forgot to mention one thing about the substring method. There's also a one parameter substring thing. So, So say we wanted to get everything after this character. So I want to get E, L, L, and O. So one way to do that is just do 1, 5, as I had mentioned before, or a more efficient way to do it, it's just do 1. So what the one parameter substring method does is it takes the first character and gets everything else in the string that is behind it. So let's put it into play. There we go, it did it successfully. So that's everything you need to know about the substring method. Now we are going to talk about the index of method. So this one is actually going to return an integer value back to us. So again, we're going to have our object, we'll have our dot, and we'll have the method index of. So before we put in any parameters, so let's say I want to get the index of wherever LL is in this string. LL is in the str. So, but I actually don't want to count out and see where it is. So let's find wherever LL is. So what it's going to do is return the index at wherever it finds LL in the str string. So for our reference, it's going to be start at 2. So the method should actually return the value 2. Let's check it out. All right, it did return out 2. Now, what if we pass something into here and some random thing, but it's not present within the string? It's not going to throw an error. What it is going to do is return the value of -1. The reason for that is because -1 can't be an index, because we start at 0. There is no way that negative index could ever be returned. So whenever -1 is returned, we know that this string is nowhere to be found within this string. So that's all you need to know about index of. And the next method that we should talk about is to lowercase. So let's just say this entire string was uppercase. Oh, and this will return a string. Oops, I have my caps lock on. String. So str.to lowercase. This is an example of a method that is a void method because we are not passing in any, because it does not return any value to us. So in fact, we don't actually need any of this because it doesn't return any value back to the user. It just performs a void method. So we're just going to print out str. So let's take a look. So two lowercase, just like it says in the name, it's just going to make every character in this lowercase. Say we even had just one lowercase, it's going to make everything lowercase, regardless of what the character already is, regardless of the state. Whoops. I made a mistake. This is actually not a void method. It is actually a method that returns a value. So final string equals that. So let's try it out now. Okay, so the reason why it is not doing this is I believe something else has to be imported. But this method is really not important. It is not tested on the AP as well. So we're just going to leave this out for now. So what we want to do is talk about the compare to. That's the next important method. This will actually be tested on the AP if you're curious. So compare to is going to print out a return an integer value. So final string is so compare to, and what this is going to do is, whoops, I made a mistake. So str dot compare to str2. So let me tell you what this method does. Compare to, if this string is equal to this string, the compare to method is going to return the value of 0. So 0 is only returned when this value is equal to this value, whenever the string of str1, str is equal to str2. Now, essentially what str does is see which word comes in the dictionary first. And the rules for compare to is capital letters will always come before lowercase letters, and it works exactly throughout your alphabet, just as A would come before B. And that's all you need to know. And shorter strings will always come first if the other string matches everything up until the point. So say we have hello as well. It's exactly like this hello. This would return 0. But say we added just a few more characters, the shorter one will be the value that comes first. Whenever this string is first in the dictionary, it will return a value less than 0. But if this string comes first in the dictionary, it will return a value that is greater than 0. So let's put it into place. So just like how we said, if everything is the same and this string is a bit shorter, then this should be the string that comes out first. So let's just print out if str is less than 0. Let's see if it prints out true. So not str, I'm sorry. Final string is less than 0. Let's take a look. True. There we go. It printed out a value that was less than 0. So we just put in a Boolean statement over here just to see if the value was less than 0. And let's see if we make string number 2 come first. So we'll just make this a capital H. So again, capital should come first. And let's see if it's still less than 0. False. The reason for that is because this string came first in the dictionary, so the value had to be greater than 0. So if we change this to greater than 0, it should now return true. There you go. So that's all you need to know about the compare to method. And one more left, the dot equals 1. So Boolean this will return a Boolean value. In other words, it'll just return true or false. And final string equals str dot equals str2. And it does exactly what the method sounds like. Does this string equal this string? And we can see over here it does not, so it should return false. There we go. And let's just make it equal just to see what happens. And there we go. Now it's equal. So that's all you need to know about the string class. You can again rewind and see if you didn't understand any of the methods, but I'm pretty sure you guys all got them all. And if you didn't, you can always arrange a tutoring time. So now we're going to talk about the math class. So there are several things the math class can do. It can return a random value. It can return the absolute value of something. It can return the power of something. And it can also return the square root of a value. There are more things that the math class can do, but for the AP, you just need to know about this. So first, and the thing about the math class is you do not have to create instance of it to access it. There's another thing called static methods, and what you need to know about them is basically you can just call math.random. You don't actually have to create an instance of the class. You can just put the class to the left of the dot and just call the method. So int random value equals, and I'll just create a print statement just to see whatever is inside that variable so that it's easier for you guys to see. Oops, misspelled it. Random value. Perfect. So let's just clean this out. And math.random. So what you need to know about math.random is, oops, to add that. And what did I misspell over here? System.out.println. I think something's just going wrong. We'll try it again. System.out.println random value. Mat.random. Okay, so it actually in fact returns a double. So that's the return type of the mat.random. It's going to return a value anywhere 0.0. It includes 0.0 up till 1.0, but does not include 1.0. So essentially, it will include all values 0.0 to 0.99999 infinite. So if we just return, and then it would just chooses a random value and just returns it. So let's see what it does. So again, it just returned any value between 0.0 and 0.9999999, etc. So it could be any value. But to make mat.random something that is actually usable, that could actually be thing, we want to cast it to an int. And essentially what casting to an int does is chops off all of the decimal values off of it. So I think I talked about casting in the previous lesson, but essentially everything to the right of the decimal will just be chopped off. So this value, if cast to the int, it will just return 0. Here, let's give it a try. See? 0. And the reason for that is because it can't return anything else, because it returns any value from 0.0 to 0.99999. So you may be asking, how do we get a value that is greater than 1, an actual integer value? Well, we can actually multiply the value. So we'll multiply the value by 10. So now what this should do is return anything from 0 to 9. The reason for that is originally mat.random would return anything from 0.0 to 0.9999, etc., what was previously mentioned. But if we multiply it by 10, 0 times 10 is 0, all right? We have 0, and then the greatest value, that is, it is 0.99999. So it'll be 9.99999, etc., or 10, which is not included, times 10, 1 times 10, and that's 10. So it should give any value from 0 to 9, because we're also casting it to an int. So because it'll chop off all of the decimals. So it should actually now return an integer anywhere from 0 to 9. See, we got 5. Let's say I want every value from 10 to 20. All right, the way how we do that is we're going to have to add the value of 10. So whatever value is returned, even if 0 is returned from this, we're going to have to add 10 to it regardless. So it's going to start off at 10. And let's just take a look at what this is going to do. 18. The reason for that is because you take a value, let's say the lowest value is 0 from this. Multiply it by 10, it's still 0, and add 10 to it, it's still going to be 10 because we're starting off at 10. But if we go over here, 0 to 1, and then we take the greatest value of 1 times 10, 10 plus 10 is 10. So it's going to return any value from 0 to 20, 20 excluded. So that's how math.random works. So you can play with it, but all you need to know about math.random is it returns any value from 0 to 1 excluding 1, and you can make these simple additions to customize it to what you need. So next thing that we should talk about in math.random are pretty simple next few methods. So math.abs, which is essentially just going to return the absolute value of whatever you pass into it. So if we put in 1, there we go, and 1, and just to show you absolute value, even if we pass a positive value, it should still return the same value. There we go. Math.abs is pretty self-explanatory. Math.pow, that's also a pretty easy one. I believe it returns a double, so we're gonna have to make that a double. And math.pow cannot be, all right. It actually returns int. Math.pow. Oh, the reason why it stores an error is because we need 2 parameters. All right, I was about to explain that. So let's say we want to do 3 to the power of, or let's do something easily that we can calculate in our heads. 2 to the power of 3. That should return 8. That is commonly known. So what I had mentioned before, it returns a double. And it should return the value 8.0. There we go. And again, if you want this in an integer value, you can of course cast it to an int. So I'll just chop off that decimal, and it will, oops, I have to also change this to an int. Eight. Perfect. So how it works is you have the first parameter, which is considered your base, and then 3 is considered the exponent. So it's the same thing as 2 to the power of 3. Same thing works. So I want to get 4 to the power of 2. That should actually end up returning 16. So 16. All right. And to remember all of these, as you can see, I sometimes forget what the return value is for these methods. It's like what I had shown you earlier. You have math class documentation. And you can see every method and what the return value is. You just Google, again, all I typed was just math class documentation, and it's just the first one over here. and you can see what everything does. So like the abs method, told you it returns a double and get the absolute value of it right over here. Pretty simple. So now that you guys understand how the POW method works, there's just one last one you guys should probably know about, and that is math.square root. Of course, this is doubled because many square roots come in decimals. So let's just name this random value. Same thing, just to keep it consistent with whatever's down here. Equals math.square root. And let's say we want to just get the square root of value of 16. That should be pretty common knowledge. 4. So puts up 4.0. Again, the reason for that is because it returns a double. And if you just wanted to get an int, again, you can just cast it to an int. But yeah. So math.square root is also pretty self-explanatory. Now there's one last thing that we need to talk about, and that is wrapper classes. So I had previously mentioned that you know how int, let's say hi, equals 1. You're declaring one and you're initializing it. These are called primitives. But the wrapper class for this is it's actually the same thing if you do, hold on, let me just write this out. You can actually have integer the same way how we've been doing objects. Hi2 equals new integer, and the parameter is whatever you want. Essentially the same thing. So you can do that. The same thing is for doubles. So double I equals 1.0, and we have double, new double, 4.0. Same thing. And the reason why we talk about these wrapper classes is because say you wanted to set a value int high to the maximum integer value that Java can have. And the way how we do that is integer.max_value. That's how we get the maximum integer value that Java can handle. And oops, I should probably print out this value. Print ln high. Oops, misspelled it over there. There you go. So that is the maximum integer value that Java has. And I believe the minimum value, again, you can just do min_value to get the minimum value. Again, it's just a variable. That's why we don't have the parentheses that we've been seeing before. So it should actually end up returning a negative value. There we go. That's the least possible integer value for the Java class. Okay, I think that wraps it up for today. Thank you so much for listening to my lesson. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. And thank you for your time, and I hope you all have a great rest of your day.